Welcome to Wine Vault TV, New Zealand's most passionate internet wine show. I'm Jason Bryant, your host, and this is Ken Becker, the gentleman who introduced me to wine making the garagey style. You can hear the cicada in the background actually, it's kind of a nice little tune.
It's good, yeah. Bit of local music.
And we are tasting our wine, the wine that we make, both in the back here, underneath the house, and also at Ken's house out in West Auckland. Or well, central.
Yep.
A 2007 Merlot with a bit of, from memory, it's got a bit of Cabernet and a bit of Malbec.
Yep, Merlot and about 10% Malbec.
Yeah. And how long have you been making wine?
Oh, for about 15 years. And yeah, when I came back from the UK to live in Auckland, I caught up with some old friends of mine, and one of the things that they were doing was they were a group of architects, and they made their own wine. So I helped them for a couple of years, and then I thought, well, maybe I should do this myself. So I got involved with a local potter who was also a friend of mine, and we took the craft of making pots a bit one step further and introduced them to a bit of enology.
Okay. And but what kind of wine styles do you like? Because we make a fairly European styled kind of wine, hopefully not by fluke, more by design.
Well, I'd have to agree, hopefully not by fluke. I like red wine, and I like Bordeaux blend predominantly, although I have to say I'm also partial to the Rhone varietals. But and so when I started making wine, it was quite difficult to get good quality fruit, and there was a predominance of Cabernet, but it was West Auckland Cabernet, and it was invariably a bit unripe, and the struggle to turn its grassy greenness into a drinkable wine was almost enough to put me off.
Just one thing for the viewers, that the Bordeaux varietals are Cabernet, Petit Verdot, or Cabernet Sauvignon, Petit Verdot, Malbec, Merlot, and I'm just trying to think of the other one, Cabernet Franc.
Cabernet, yeah.
And they've always struggled, apart from with recent advances in viticultural technique, really pioneered by Dr. Richard Smart, have struggled to get ripeness in New Zealand Cabernets. It's a very thick-skinned grape and very difficult to ripen and get it to its full potential. And also the climatic conditions in Auckland make it even more difficult. It's got humid, you suffer a bit of rot on the grapes sometime with the humidity. But down in Hawke's Bay, where they're getting a lot kind of crisper, drier conditions, you get better ripening. Also the Rhone varietals that Ken talked about are the Grenache, the Cinsault, Carignan, Mourvedre, Syrah, or Shiraz. Like in Chateau Neuf de Pape, which is in the southern Rhone, you're allowed up to 13 varietals in your wine, so it is a red and white blend, but most people tend to stick to the trusted ones of Syrah and Grenache, and sometimes throw a bit of Mourvedre in there. So right. Yeah.
But we don't really have those grape options in Auckland, and I have found trying to source grapes from other parts of the country to be problematic. What has, of course, happened in recent years is that, first of all, viticulture amongst the quality of viticulture amongst some of the smaller producers has improved enormously, as you referred to Richard Smart and also others that have helped drive this. But the other thing is that Merlot has entered the scene, and Merlot in some ways is well suited to Auckland conditions, because it ripens several weeks earlier in the season than the Cabernet, so it gets the benefit of what we usually have, a nice warm February and March, and so it's ready usually early in April. Whereas the Cabernet is a couple of weeks later, and there's a high risk of getting a considerable rainfall in those last few weeks, and that often destroys what would have been a really good crop.
Yeah. See, I'm more that kind of Rhone grown style. And if we, I think that we're almost getting hot enough down in the gimlet gravels to start experimenting. I mean, they do Tempranillo down there, and I'd like to kind of see a bit of Grenache and Mourvedre being kind of experimented with down there. I think that especially Grenache, for those who really have embraced the Pinot era of winemaking in New Zealand, I think Grenache is another step and a link between Pinot, like Burgundy, and the Rhone.
Yeah, it would be great to see those Hawke's Bay producers introduce Grenache, because they're already doing well with the Syrah. There's 2 or 3 of them, like Trinity Hill, Esk Valley, and
Craggy Range.
And people are making outstanding and quite European style Syrahs, and they're a real pleasure compared with your average, and I mean average, Australian Shiraz. not wishing to say this.
There are a few Aussies making a bit more kind of restrained kind of Shiraz Syrahs over there.
Yeah.
So what do you think of this? This is the 2007. Right. The colour is, I mean, it's unfiltered, unfined, wild yeast ferment. So I mean, it's not overly brilliant, although it is quite bright.
Yeah. And I mean, the first thing about it is the nose, and I'd say that, you know, the nose is doing the job of enticing you to try the glass. It's a controlled fruit with a very slight hint of vanilla there on the nose, and which actually does come up on the palate.
Yeah, I get the summer. I get kind of raspberry, plummy characters on the nose. Also a bit of funkiness. Yeah,
it's the sort of lighter end of what you'd get from the Merlots. You know, it's not. This is not a weighty wine, but you could probably call it a mid-weight. It's certainly not frivolous, and it's got a good mouthfeel. Good balance,
very good balance.
Bit of tannin sitting on the back, and so being 07, this was the wine which we had in not in new oak, in older oak, about 2 to 3 year old barrels for 2 years, and then it's been in the bottle for a couple of years now.
Yeah, and I've got to say, it would give a lot of other wines, and this is not just being biased because I had a hand in making it, but I like it because it's very food friendly. It is balanced, and I just find it a bit more. It's not as linear and one-dimensional as a lot of commercial, should we say? Red wines, Bordeaux blends that you can find.
I think, you know, like, it is Merlot dominant, but it has been helped by having about 10% Cabernet and 10% Malbec. And
certainly structure-wise.
Yeah, and also the colour of it too, because it's got reasonable colour for the weight of the wine. Yeah, this is and the other thing is that while we sort of try to make a European style wine, and part of that is at the ferment, getting good temperature during the ferment, 30 plus degrees, letting the grapes sit for macerate for about 3 to 4 weeks afterwards. Plenty of stirring, plenty of plunging in the early part of the ferment. So working the wine, and then I tend to at the first racking not really remove everything from the barrels. There's a little bit left there, which continues to contribute. And this wine really is only just starting to sort of work up some of the sort of low-level
layered characteristics.
The sort of polyphenols and things are coming through now.
And it is true, because it was initially, when we first bottled it, it was quite feral.
It was a bit acidic, actually, wasn't it? Yeah.
And now it's settled down to something that you would throw on the table, and we put it actually in another wine label's bottle.
Yes.
An infamous
trick.
a well-known wine label, and it's a little trick that we played and got people to taste it, and they all kind of raved about it.
Did they?
Until I told them.
Yeah, and then they
started changing their mind.
Right, yeah.
Which I find, like, the fickleness of human nature to be interesting when you sit around a table and then you produce 2 bottles of wine and they've got the same in them, one with a label that they recognise and one with a label they don't. And if it's an expensive label they recognise, they will always guaranteed give you a different appraisal of the wine than the one that they don't. Even if it's the cheaper wine in both bottles.
Yeah,
and I'm the same. I'm guilty of it. It's brilliant marketing.
Well, it's interesting. I've heard some very well-known winemakers say that they often don't recognise their own wine, and even when their own wine is one that's actually excellent. I mean, if it's in amongst other good wines, they won't necessarily pick it out.
Yeah.
So.
And it depends on where you taste that wine in the proceedings.
There's a lot to it. How you're feeling, whether you're eating with it, having food with it, or whether. So all these things are contributing factors.
Yeah, absolutely. Environmental factors, of which you'd know quite a bit about.
Just a little. Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much for coming on, Ken.
Right.
And long may the good winemaking continue.
It's a pleasure, and thanks for having me on.